Hey there nation, welcome to the show where we help you to play miniatures wargaming on a budget. It is I, Commander Cheapskate, and we are back with another episode of Hobby Side, and on this video, we'll be taking a look at the various Mordheim terrain that we use in our Mordheim battle reports. And this one's actually kind of a special episode because of my buddy Iron Major here with us today, and Iron Major is the individual who makes all the terrain that you see on this channel. So he'll be talking about exactly the design concept he came up with, what he makes the materials out of, where he gets his ideas from, what he's inspired by, and how he goes about making these various terrain pieces. So today we'll be showcasing O'Reilly Hall, which you've seen in our battle reports for Blood Bowl, as well as our two brand new ruined buildings that we have, and our Shadows over Mordheim battle reports, and same thing with the Aqueduct system that we've been using in our battle reports as well. So we'll be talking about those today, and talking about how they're made, and the actual creator himself, Iron Major, will be the one talking about us today. So with that being said, let's get this video report on the roll. We'll first start off with these three buildings first. Alright, so we're going to start with these three buildings here. So Iron Major, go and talk about these buildings that you've made, and where did you basically get the idea to make these Mordheim buildings from?
Okay, well, you said you wanted to start video recording Mordheim battles, and so I started doing some research on Mordheim builds, and quite frankly I was inspired by Eric's Hobby Workshop because he did a bunch of builds in preparation for Mordheim, and so I watched his videos on YouTube to get some of the inspiration for what I did. And what I was trying to do was try to keep it to a scale that was closely matched to the buildings that we had before. So like, for example, the terracotta covered buildings to the right there. They're smaller, but when you build something for Mordheim, because you have to have interiors that you can use, the buildings need to be a little bit bigger. I didn't want to get too much bigger so that it wouldn't look too strange in terms of scale when I built it. And at first I thought it'd be a fun build, and they were fun, except that when you build a Mordheim building, because of the damage, you have to build the interiors and make the structures so they look fairly realistic in terms of how they would really be built. So that added a whole new dimension of difficulty to the buildings, especially with respect to the roof lines.
Yeah, I could definitely tell that, because if you look at some of these buildings, like let's go zoom this one here in the middle here, we got a lot of battle damage in this one. So you can see that we have all that planking inside the building with the burning. So like what kind of things did you have to, what kind of considerations did you have to make in order to do the interiors? Like what kind of materials did you have to use, or what kind of design elements?
Okay, so if you look at the older buildings with the terracotta roofs on the right, those are built primarily from different types of cardboard materials on a cardboard base. And those were relatively easy to build because I didn't have to worry about the interior, so I didn't have to worry about the thickness of the walls and so forth. So they're primarily all cardboard. Whereas when I built these buildings, because we had to show the walls, and the walls couldn't just be a piece of cardboard or foam board, I used extruded polystyrene insulation foam, the blue foam or the pink foam, to build the walls. So these buildings are all based on XPS insulation foam, foam boards. So the bases are built out of old shower board, I guess you would call it, from we got at a local hardware store that were leftovers, and I just used them to cut them up so they would have a rigid base so they wouldn't warp. And then we used foam board, XPS foam board for the walls, and then once I built the walls, then I had to piece together the roofs. The roofs were the hardest part.
And what did you frame the roofs out of? So you can see we got some exterior, some exposed framing, and then the shingles. What did you make that out of?
Okay, that part was difficult because I had to almost be like a carpenter in building them. I'm not a carpenter, so I looked at some pictures of some construction from medieval times. I watched other hobby videos, like from Eric's Hobby Workshop, and really the Eric's Hobby Workshop videos are really helpful. So I use small pieces of wood that I got at the hobby store and at the big box home improvement stores. They sell like where they have dowels and things like that. They sell smaller strips of wood for a very reasonable price. And I use that and pretty much coffee stirrers and other sticks that you could either get at a hobby store or at a Walmart. And then for the roofing, they're supposed to simulate slate. I just use very thin cardboard, like from a cereal box, and then I just painted it to look like that. So basically what I did was I built the roof frame like you would a regular roof. Then I battle damaged it and overlaid it with coffee stirrers so that I would have something to attach the slate tiles to, and then that's the way I did it.
All right, so let's go and talk about the construction here on these lower parts here of the building. So if we look here in our video here, as you can see, we have these really awesome textured stone here that looks like piles of stone and stone bricks and stuff are made out of that. So this stuff you said before is made out of insulation foam. Did you actually have to hand carve all these little individual stones and bricks and things?
Yeah. So yes, I did. So initially, when I built buildings for you to use, I wasn't so intricate in the detail. However, and because I was using cardboard, so it was difficult to do. But then I started watching a lot of the terrain videos, building videos on YouTube, and I think the first one I watched that had to do with this technique was from a YouTube site called the Terrain Wench. And she showed how to sculpt the foam to look like individual stonework, and then also melt on the terrain tutor, and also Jeremy on Black Magic Craft. They all use similar techniques, and they teach you how to do that. So between the three of them, I just used their techniques, and then you basically just draw the stone pattern on the XPS foam either with a ballpoint pen or a felt pen, and then you use either a ballpoint or a pencil to sculpt the stone the way you want. It's actually not very difficult, it's just that it's very tedious work.
Yeah, I can imagine spending like hours just kind of carving these individually. So let's go and talk about the paint scheme real quick. So first of all, we'll start off with the actual stonework real quick. So what was the technique you used in order to paint up the stonework on all the buildings here?
Okay, so actually doing the stonework, this drone work, trying to just draw and carve all the individual stones on there, and you kind of got to think through how you're going to do it. So that's like something that's hard to do. And quite frankly, what I did was I did it while I was watching TV. And I just had a tray on my lap, and I just did it as I watched TV. And then once I got the work done, then all I did was I sealed it with black paint and flat black acrylic paint and Mod Podge mix technique, which I learned from Black Magic Craft. And then once I got that base coat on there, then I just painted it in acrylic paint, cheap acrylic paint that I got from the hobby store at Walmart, Peter Gray, Apple Barrel. And then once I did that, then I put a black wash. And all the different terrain making channels have their own recipes for the black wash. So I just black washed it, and I just dry brushed it with a mixture of light, flat, gray acrylic paints that I got from the hobby store or from Walmart, and I just dry brushed it, and that's the way it looks. It comes out pretty good. Yeah,
they look really awesome. How about the plastering that you used for up here? So like, you notice the second levels have all this kind of plaster look on it. How'd you go about painting those as well? For the the upper levels.
Okay, so they're supposed to look like half timber construction that they had from medieval times in Europe, and I've been to Europe, so I've kind of seen them up close. Now, I didn't want to go through the hassle of putting actual wood on there because it gets kind of difficult and gets more expensive. So I was just trying to make it look like it. So if you look closely, it doesn't really make sense the way I did it, but it kind of does. So what I did was I used cardboard from things like cereal boxes, things like that. And then I painted it and cut it into strips. And then I just outlined the windows and then put it where I thought beams would naturally go. And I just glued it to the XPS foam. And then the XPS foam I just painted. And then added sand and grit to the areas where the walls were destroyed. So it would look like the interior of the walls. Because it's really made out of some kind of plaster or mud or something in real life. Yeah. And that's why it's the color it is too.
Yeah, that's awesome. As you can see here on the side here with O'Reilly Hall here, which is what we use for our sports announcements and Blood Bowl battle reports. You can see we got that nice kind of plaster kind of paint job that you put on these things. These things look absolutely amazing. Just the amount of battle damage you have on them.
And if you're not sure what that stuff should look like, you can just go and research it online and see what half timber houses look like, and you can build it.
And then finally, last we're going to talk about these windows here. So you can see in these windows, I'm going to zoom in real quick for our viewers. So as you can see, you guys, we got like these nice diamond pattern frames for like the small pieces of glass that looks like leaded glass window panes. So how'd you go about making those for the buildings?
Okay, so when I did all these buildings, I was really trying to stay loyal to the original buildings that we built for our battlefields. And if you look at the older buildings, if you wouldn't mind panning over to that slowly.
Let's go show them real quick.
They're basically just black, flat painted windows, and then we etched on the window pattern with a white color pencil. Okay, so but because we didn't have to worry about the interiors because we weren't fighting from the interiors. Well, these are different because you're going to be on the interior of the buildings. I had to come up with a way to try to replicate those windows. Now, there are all different kinds of ways of doing that. And in fact, Jeremy from Black Magic Craft recently had a video he did, which was really very intricate and detailed, and it was just super. But I wasn't willing to do that much of work. So I did some research online, and I found this thing called PT. I think it's called PTFE mesh, which is some kind of fiberglass or plastic mesh that they use in cooking, so like barbecues and stuff. And you can find it online on Amazon, and I got it. And I ordered it. I wasn't sure how it would work, but it was perfect for what we had to do. And so I just cut it to size, and then slid it into the windows. Now, at first, I just cut it to size and kind of used friction to hold it in place, and so some of them looked a little warped and things, but I guess it's okay if they were fire damage and stuff.
Yeah, exactly. Looks
but
like
the second build here, I made it so that the wood frame, the window frame, actually overlaps the edge of the PTFE foam, the XPS foam, so that when I slid the mesh in from the back, it kind of bumps up against it, and so it's super glued in there.
Oh, awesome. So you kind of sandwiched it in there then.
Yeah. Well, not sandwiched, but it's just there's some support from the window frames.
Awesome. And the last one we're going to talk about real quick is the flocking that you use on the bases. So where'd you get the flocking from, or how'd you go about making the flocking for that?
Okay, so in the past, I learned by watching YouTube that you can make your own flock, and in keeping with the theme of this channel, I tried to minimize the cost, and also because I'm cheap myself.
Yeah.
So I tried to because flocking can be kind of expensive for a novice, and so at first I started doing some research, and I watched guys like Luke from Luke's Affordable Paint Service, and Mel from Mel the Terrain Tutor, and Viv from Rubbish In and Rubbish Out. And I learned from them how to make a flock from sawdust. The problem is when you get sawdust, when you scrounge it up, you gotta refine it, and so you get the most fine particles possible, and then you go through a process of soaking it in acrylic paint, and then drying it and so forth, and then you come up with this flock. Now, I've pretty much used up all my initial batches of flock, and so I kind of broke down and spent some money and bought some regular flock from the terrain manufacturers that people use for terrain layouts and things. And so on these later builds, that's what I've been using. But on some of the earlier builds, like the foliage, I use sawdust.
Yeah, so you can see that, like this is talking about the flocking with the sawdust. You can see on the trees here, especially these autumn-colored ones that you see on the battlefield. Same thing with this huge forest here. This is really cool. You see this quite a bit in our battle reports, but yeah, just really awesome on that part. So that's pretty much the design concept behind these buildings here. So we're actually going to show you an example of a framework of what it looks like when it's being built. So we're going to cut real quick. We'll bring out some of the materials that Iron Major is currently working on right now, and we'll show you exactly the technique involved with making those. All right, so we're back. So as you can see here, we have a current building right now that Iron Major is making for Mordheim Terrain. This one is currently under construction, so you can see exactly the process he's talking about when he builds it. At the same time, we also have a building here, which is this little black roof shack. You guys have seen this quite a bit in our battle reports. This is actually the very first building that you've actually created. Isn't that right, Major? Yeah,
that's correct. So I built this, and this is all built out of cardstock. Now this stuff, I think it's called railroad board or something. And so that's the base, and it's pretty rigid. Now I don't use this stuff anymore. I use this old shower board that I got at one of the big box home improvement stores. But all the walls and stuff are made out of cardboard. All the wooden strips are made out of cardboard. The roof is made out of the same stuff as the base, and then all the shingles, which are supposed to replicate slate shingles, are made out of cardboard, and everything's painted. But this was the first building I made, and I made it based on instructions that were provided in this book that Games Workshop produced in the 90s.
Yeah. I remember this one, How to Make War Games Terrain. This is back in the day when Games Workshop showed you how to how to build terrain, how to build stuff.
But I guess their marketing strategy has changed, and so they want you to, I guess, buy their already pre-made terrain. But back in the day, they really showed you how to build stuff. And so with this initial build that they suggested and provided plans on how to build, then we went off from there.
From there, of course, we then went to the terracotta roofs, and as you can see, the building just kind of exponentially grown from there.
And if you look at some of the things, that they just kind of don't make sense, but they just give you the impression that what they are, so terracotta, but that's not the way terracotta roofs look. But just to give you that impression that it's a terracotta roof.
All right, so as you see, this is where we kind of started off with when Iron Major started building. In fact, actually, the neat part about this one, there's actually a little window here. See if I can get the light in there. You can kind of see the cardboard inside of it, the interior of it. So that kind of shows you exactly like how it originally started off. But now we're going to focus on our current building. We have like a row house here that you're building,
right?
From Mordheim. So let's go and talk about like some of the, and this is the actual like bare bones construction, so that way you guys can see exactly how it kind of is made. So go and just run through how you pretty much.
Okay, so what I normally do is I just make a sketch of what I want to do, and I have standard measurements for things, so that when I make a build, I know how big the windows should be, how far above the floor the windows should be, how big the doors should be. So for example, each level is approximately 2.5 inches high per level. On the earlier buildings, they were only 2 inches. And then you got to figure in how big the edges are going to be and things like that. So once I come up with an idea of how big everything's going to be, after I make an initial sketch, then I just cut the pieces out of this blue XPS foam, or you can use that pink XPS foam. And then the hardest part of this whole thing was cutting out the windows, because it's really hard to cut them out and make them look nice and clean. That's why making battle damaged buildings are a little bit easier, because if you make a mistake, you can always damage it. And so that's the nice part about it. So I start off with it. This is I think it's 1/2 inch or 5/8 inch XPS foam. It's kind of nice because it's easier for the buildings to build that with. So I just make the design and I cut it out. The hardest thing for me, it might be maybe for not other people, but is cutting a straight edge on the foam. So my whole life has gotten a lot easier with this stuff since I bought a Proxxon foam cutter. It's easier to cut bigger pieces in straight with straight edges on it. Now even there, I'm still learning how to do it on some of these angles. As you can see, there's ridges on it. Yeah. So I've got it kind of helps in a way, because I can put the stone pattern and try to hide it.
Yeah, exactly. And you can see here, we can see like you're drawing in the stone pattern with a ballpoint pen right now.
Yeah.
And you're also just kind of carving directly into the styrofoam, correct? Yeah.
The other terrain builders on YouTube, they have different techniques, but I just like using a ballpoint pen, a medium ballpoint pen. And I can kind of, in my mind's eye, see the pattern I want to build, and then I just draw it on there, and then I make it a little deeper after I make the initial design, and then put it together that way. So this is a dry fit, basically. I've got long straight pins holding it together, make sure everything's going to work, and then I've already got a base cut out. So I paint everything up, and the last thing I do is I attach it to the base.
Yeah, I noticed you use a lot of pins in a lot of your construction techniques. You just do kind of like to do dry fitting, correct? For your little...
Well, I also use it in the final build. So like in Mel, the terrain tutor, he uses the pins to hold his construction together. It gives a little bit of rigidity and strength to it. So in addition to in these, I hold them together primarily with white glue, or what a lot of the people in England or UK call PVA glue. And so like Elmer's glue in America, I just use that, or construction builder's glue, carpenter's glue, and I just hold it together, and I reinforce the joints with the straight pins, which are really inexpensive, but it adds strength.
It's a nice little cost-effective way, especially to add some structure, some stability to the structures, because a lot of this is just kind of held together with just glue. And primarily glue for most of this. So you gotta definitely add that rigidity in there, or it just kind of crumbles apart at that point.
Sometimes I'll use hot glue for some pieces, like on the roof. Building the roofs, because I don't want to wait for the glue to dry, and with some of these angles it's kind of hard to get them to dry in the proper position, so I'll use hot glue, and I'll use clothespins and things like that to hold as clamps.
Okay, awesome. Alright, so with that being said, now we haven't exactly show you how the buildings are made, and how we kind of transitioned from our basic buildings originally up to the really fancified full-scale ones. Last thing we're going to talk about this video report for our different buildings. We're going to talk about the aqueducts next, and then that'll wrap it up. So the very last thing we're going to talk about real quick are these aqueduct systems. As you can see, we got 4 aqueducts that Iron Major has made for our battlefield. There's 4 different sections of these. Adds a lot of really cool three-dimensionality to the battlefield, and also they're just super detailed pieces of work. So Iron Major, how did you go about making these terrain pieces, and what kind of design concept you came up with, and so forth?
Okay, so I was looking at a way to kind of build some elevation into some of the structures for your Mordheim battlefield, kind of like the walkways are in Necromunda. So I was trying to think of something that would fit into this type of scenario, and then I thought of aqueducts, because aqueducts, they're different elevations, they're all over the place in Europe. So I looked up what aqueducts look like on YouTube and online, and to see what they looked like, and then I came up with this idea. So all I did was I actually broke down and bought 1 inch thick XPS pink foam. So it's not very thick. and then I drew the pattern of what I wanted. And what I was trying to do is build an aqueduct system that would actually span your tabletop. And so this kind of worked out. And I had the base material already. This is just actually the showerboard stuff on the bottom. It kind of looks like dry erase board, but it's not really dry erase board. It's really thin, easy to work with. So I just cut those to size. And then based on those, then I made the design with these arches, Roman arches. And then I just sculpted the stone. Now I didn't want to put them directly onto the base, so I built these from the spoil from where I cut these out. I built the bases of each pillar.
Oh, so like the pediments they rest on?
Yeah. So
okay.
For the foundation that they rested on, and I did it the same way. I hot glued the bases to the thing, to the showerboard base, and then I glued this on there. They're pins, straight pins, that are also reinforcing the bonds there to make them strong. And then on top, it's just flat. And so what I did was I did the same pattern on top. You can't really see it on this one. And then with the spoil from here, I cut these edges to create a channel here, so it looked like a channel where water could have flowed. And then I just carved the stone pattern in there, and I made some loose stones and stuff so it looks old and damaged. And then I used gravel and sand on the edges here. I glued them on with white glue and at the bases. And then I painted it like I always do. And then the last thing I did was I flocked it, and then I added some tufts of static grass that you can buy online, and I put some on top. And just to make it look like they're overgrown. Yeah,
the tufts really sell it. Like, especially if you look on the top. I'm going to zoom in another piece right here. So actually, zoom right here. So you can see in the tufts, the grass and the flocking on the top really sells the fact that these are all old, and you got things growing inside of them at this point because they haven't been maintained and such. They just look really, really awesome.
And it's interesting because as soon as I got these done for the Mordheim battlefield, then Eric's Hobby Workshop came up with something very similar. I thought it was kind of interesting.
Yeah, it looked really cool. I think he called it, what did he call it? I forgot what he called it, but yeah.
It's an elevated walkway.
Yeah, elevated walkway, yeah. It looked really, really cool the way he did it.
Yeah, he's really good.
All right, you guys, so that's going to do for this one. As you can see here, we got lots of information now about how the buildings were built. It's kind of nice because I actually got the subject matter expert who actually built it to talk about it, because before I was just kind of spitballing with an idea of how I did it, because I would walk in and watch him working on things mid-project and just kind of piecemeal it together. But as you can see here, now you got the exact info right from the source about how all this is made. And once again, just amazingly beautiful work on all of your terrain. Not just the terrain on this battlefield, but you can see we also got our shelves, and every single piece of terrain that we pretty much have that's homemade, Iron Maiden's been making it by hand over the span of years with our wargaming group. And it's just absolutely amazing. So thank you very much for the amount of work and detail, but it just looks awesome as always. And a lot of our commenters, a lot of you guys just kind of just celebrate about us. So every time you guys want to drop a comment about the workmanship and the craftsmanship of Iron Major's work, just feel free to put it on there because it is all kinds of awesome. So that's good to do for this one, you guys. As always, please feel free to like, comment, and or subscribe. Your guys' input is invaluable to us as always. Also check us out on Facebook, Instagram, as well as blogger.com for all the latest greatest hobby news related to this channel. That's good to do for this one, you guys. We'll catch you guys in the next one. Peace out and stay classy.